Welcome to another episode of Between Lewis and Lovecraft. Thank you so much for checking us out. This show is all about learning about the authors that have inspired us and diving into the stories that they not only created but lived as well. So join us as we explore the worlds that live just out of reach. Today we start the conversation on H.P. Lovecraft. This is a blender episode, the prep stage. We're getting all the ingredients for what it takes to make a complicated man and getting the meal ready. Honestly, Lovecraft was so complicated and had such a messed up life that there's no way for us to do it all in just 1 hour. So remember that if you want to add to the show and the conversation, you can always go to our Facebook page and talk with us there. This is a multiple episode series in which we'll try our damnedest to help you understand who this creepy guy from New England is, what he wrote about, and what the heck is a Cthulhu. If you want to enter a world of insurmountable darkness and horror, unending madness, unrelenting towers of odd geometry, then this is the place to start.
You don't like anyone else doing the recording, do you?
I'm the recorder. Not a recorder like you play it like in third grade recorder.
I totally thought you meant the third grade kind of recorder.
I'll be the recorder. Boop-a-de-boop. No, I'm Tyler Clausen. You like that? I just introduced ourselves because I remembered really we are recording.
And the other voice you hear is me, Hannah Ray Lambert.
I wish you wouldn't have said your name. Just, it's me.
It's me, guys.
It's me.
like when you call someone and you're
Right.
like, hey, it's me.
Hey, it's me. Yeah.
Before the days of caller ID.
I was just about to say, like, caller ID has ruined that.
Yeah, I'm dating myself a little bit there.
What I like is the opposite, is like we live in a world of caller ID and I still have people say who they are. Like my father-in-law. Like, Peter, I know who you are, and if I don't have you in my phone already, like, our relationship is really in a bad place. You don't have to say, hey, it's your father-in-law, Peter. You married my daughter 4.5 years ago.
Her name is Rebecca.
Yeah, do you remember Rebecca? You dated her, and then you married her?
He just wants to make sure.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, you are listening to the podcast Between Lewis and Lovecraft. That's the name of this podcast that you are currently listening to.
Yeah, that's us.
I'm staring directly at Hannah as I say that. I'm making her very
really
uncomfortable.
awkward.
Yeah. Hannah, you are listening to. And now I feel like I'm on the Disney Channel.
You should start doing the like mouse ears.
thing. Hi, I'm Tyler Clausen, and you're listening to Between Lewis and Lovecraft. Little mouse symbol. Actually, be more like a little Cthulhu symbol.
Ooh, and that's a great segue because today we are talking about H.P. Lovecraft.
Nice. Very well done segue. We just, Amy clap.
We should just quit now. We're never going to do better than this.
Amy's hanging out with us again. Amy is the owner and just sole proprietor of the Book Nook.
It's really amazing. She's only 15 and she runs this whole business.
She doesn't even have her driver's permit, but she owns, runs, and she is taking over this town.
She said, I wish, for those who can't hear.
No, but we are in the Book Nook, and it is owned by Amy's mom and dad, Paul and Megan, and they're wonderful people. We just want to thank them before we get started because I'll forget later.
But yeah, they've been great. This is a great environment to podcast
surrounded
in.
by books, talking about books.
What more could you ask for?
More whiskey, but that's just a me thing.
We'll bring some
I'll stick
next
with
time.
my LaCroix or Polar. I'm drinking Polar today.
Is that like off-brand LaCroix?
I think it's better than LaCroix. It's like if there was a Reese's Cups, but it was better than Reese's. It was like a higher end Reese's.
As someone who hates LaCroix, I'm really offended that you compared my favorite candy to
LaCroix. It's my favorite candy. Oh my god.
We have a ton in
We
common.
should actually talk about H.P. Lovecraft today.
We're going to have to cut like half of that out. Insert weird sound effect here and go.
And we're back. Sorry about that tangent. Yes, so we're talking about H.P. Lovecraft, which is undeniably one of my favorite authors.
That's why he named the podcast Between Lewis
and
Lovecraft.
Yeah. And as much as I'm excited to talk about Lewis, which we did in the last couple episodes, I'm probably more excited to talk about Lovecraft because I know less about him. In a sense, like I'm learning about him more now because I knew about Lewis when I was a younger kid, and now that I'm an adult, I get to learn about this new author. And today, I spent all day today listening to audiobooks, like free audiobook versions of Lovecraft stuff. And man, every single story, I'm like, is this my favorite Lovecraft story? I think this is my favorite Lovecraft story. Every single time. I did decide on one, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Do we want to share that now? Later?
I mean, maybe later.
Maybe later?
I mean, I don't know. It's so exciting. It's like Christmas.
I mean, I've got a 3-way tie for my favorite.
Do you?
So
Let's just talk about this now.
Commit.
Let's get people excited. Like, they're going to be like, ooh, which ones are they like? And then when we talk about them later, they can be like, oh, that's the one that they really liked.
Okay.
So,
do you want to do your favorite first, or should I do my 3?
I'll do mine because you have 3, and that's going to take a little bit more time.
I have commitment issues.
Yeah. I don't. I've decided that it is From Beyond.
Really?
Yeah. Did you read that one?
Okay, I have to admit, I did not read From Beyond.
Ooh, it's so good. It's so good. It's got a nice little twist. It's got a very Poe-esque type of feel, but like very Lovecraftian, very technological aliens, like sci-fi. But then like the Poe inspiration is there. We're going to talk about that later of just, I don't know. It was so good, though. I love that story so much.
I'm sad I didn't make it to that one now. I'll have to read it as soon as we're done here.
Yeah. It's not very long. The audio one that I listened to, I think it was off of Levervox, whatever it's called. I think it was like maybe 15 minutes long.
Wow.
Yeah, it was short.
My 3 favorites are shorter ones, too.
Yeah.
I'm torn between The Temple, which I mentioned to you in one of our texts.
Right, yeah. And then you probably read more, and you're like, wait, no, I shouldn't have sent that to him.
The Cats of Ulthar.
Yeah, Cats of Ulthar is a good one.
And The Rats in the Walls.
Yeah. The Rats on the Wall gets me because I'm like, gross.
It's so gross.
Yeah. But there's a lot of that in Lovecraft, so.
Yeah.
And those are, Cats of Ulthar, it's more of a fantasy,
It's very, like, mythical.
Yeah,
sorta.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's super short. It's only like 3 pages long.
Yeah, it's pretty short. And then The Rats on the Wall is very much more of like almost a gothic horror sort of feel. And then The Temple is like, I don't know. Temple is like just...
It's like a World War I adventure / horror story.
Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong one. Am I thinking of the
Temple
Tomb?
is the submarine one.
I always think of the Tomb when people say the Temple.
The Temple is the submarine one.
That one I haven't read. That was like probably one of the first ones I read, and I had been reading so much that it kind of blurred. So I actually need to go back and read that one.
Yeah, that's
so
a
when
good
you
one.
go read From Beyond, I'm going to go read The Temple. Anyway, let's jump into Lovecraft as a person, because today, and I kind of explained this off air, today's episode is going to be a little bit more of if we were doing a cooking show, it would be the how to make a Lovecraft type of show sort of thing.
Yep.
We're going to show you all the ingredients and all the things that go into making a nice pizza pie, but I like
the blender analogy you had earlier.
It is, yeah. Like we're throwing in
it's
everything.
It's a little violent too, which is good.
Yeah. You just throw some strawberries in there and it gets bloody red and gross. Yeah, that's gross. Anyway, yes, it's like a blender. We're going to throw all the ingredients in today, and we're going to show you what goes into probably the backstory, the writing that went into his stories. We're going to see where that comes from, I think. Lots of interesting little things. So why don't you start and get us going, and then I'll jump in and interrupt you and talk about things as we go along.
That's what we're both good at. So let's start at the very beginning, guys. Howard Phillips Lovecraft, better known as HP, was born on August 20th, 1890 in Providence, Rhode Island. That's where he spent most of his life. And, for him, tragedy started very early in his life. His father, Winfield Scott Lovecraft, who was a traveling salesman, developed a type of mental disorder that's usually caused by untreated syphilis.
So we're already going into this because there's so much leading up to this.
You don't even like this?
No, this is good.
He was 3.
Yeah, you're right.
How much could happen before he turned 3 other than his dad, around on the road and getting
pages.
syphilis?
So just so everybody knows, I'm going from the book In the Mountains of Madness, not At the Mountains of Madness, which is a book written by... At the Mountains of Madness is written by H.P. Lovecraft. this is kind of a overview of his life and kind of discerning. This book by W. Scott Poole, In the Mountains of Madness, kind of goes into Lovecraft's life by almost critiquing a lot of the commentaries on his life. So it's really interesting. The guy was a fan of his and read a lot of biographies and then took a lot of those and went, this is what people say about this. This is what other people say about this. This is what we can kind of glean from it. And that's what I really liked about it is
It's like a biography of biographies.
Yeah, he admits where he doesn't have information. He talks about where he does get his information and how reliable or unreliable that information is. So his father died, and it's a pretty big deal. Not because it impacted his life per se, because I think that some other things that happened are much bigger, but like it's just it was like a shadow over his life for his entire life, or at least with his relationship with his mom and grandpa.
And even though he was so young when his dad first got committed, like he was 3 when that happened, and then his dad didn't die until he was 8 years old. So he was in this institution, Butler Hospital in Providence, for 5 years. And I've got to think that if you're a kid, that's pretty hard. Like, your dad's crazy, committed crazy. And I feel like the stigma of that and just the pressure would be a lot for a young child.
Yeah, and I think that there was a certain sense that, like, who his dad was, he kind of wanted to be a little bit. Because he was kind of an English dandy type guy. He was kind of weird. At least to the not the Lovecrafts, to the what is the maiden name of his mother? Totally forgot. Sarah Susan.
I'm scrolling. Phillips.
Phillips. Yeah, you're right. Totally.
Yeah.
Why did we forget that?
Yeah, it's
Howard Phillips Lovecraft.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So to the
We're
Phillips
just gonna
family,
pretend like we remembered that the whole time.
Winfield was kind of weird, and he was a silver like spoons and
that's what he sold.
Silverware
salesman.
Yeah, which to me is just the most ridiculous thing ever. Like, you're sitting at dinner, and somebody's like, "What are you gonna do for the rest of your life?" You're like, I don't know. I got a fork. You want a fork?
That's probably exactly how it went down.
Yeah.
He had to make a career choice. He was getting up there in the years. His parents were going to kick him out.
There is that whole adage of like salespeople are like, "Sell me this pen," and he's like, "No, bro. Sell me this fork." Right? Like, I think maybe no. That's probably not.
Well,
but
apparently he was good at it because he got syphilis. So.
Well, he traveled a lot. Yeah, and this is back in the late 1800s. I mean, very late. We're talking like 1893, 94, right?
Well, he was committed by 94, so.
Okay, yeah. And
early 1890s.
And he's traveling around, and he's a dude, traveling salesman, and he's probably getting around.
Let the record show that Tyler basically said boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Well, 19th century boys will be 19th century boys. Let's go with that, right? And so he contracted syphilis, and it went unchecked, and it straight up destroyed his brain.
Yep.
And he had a meltdown in Chicago, I believe. Gonna check.
Before we disparage the great city of Chicago.
Yeah, he ran out of his hotel in Chicago in 1893 is when this went down. So yeah, he was committed by 94. He said, "The chambermaid has insulted me. Brutal men are raping my wife upstairs. I can hear her cries, 'Oh God.'"
Is that really what he screamed?
That's what he ran out of his hotel screaming. And they're like, "Yeah, I think we should take you in."
You should get that looked at, bro.
But there's a certain sense of like, why did Sarah Susan, yeah.
Sarah Susan. But she went by Susie.
Oh, well, see, there you go.
That's why I get confused.
Yeah, Susie, why would Susie marry this guy? A lot of people think it's because she was bored, and he was a traveling salesman. He knows how to sell himself, which is what you do when you sell anything. And she was also from this Victorian age, and he was this dandy English guy. And so I think the reason why I bring it up is because Lovecraft wanted to be like this Victorian, not even Victorian, earlier, like a 17th century, 18th century kind of like gentleman, upstanding citizen who, like, leisurely living life. He didn't want to work hard. He didn't want to do all this stuff with his hands. He wanted to lounge around and think and philosophize and all kinds of stuff. And I think a lot of that comes from who his dad was, and maybe the stories that his mom told to him about his dad.
Well, his mom really, played up her English heritage too. The whole family was full of Anglophiles. They definitely thought the Brits were superior. So I think he was getting it from both sides of the family. But that becomes very obvious in his works and in his life how much he fancied himself being an Englishman, even though he's American, guys. Totally American.
Yeah. And I think we'll get to the mom quite a bit later because she plays a huge role in his life, especially later on. But yeah, so you have his dad who dies after being taken to the mental hospital for losing his shit. And then he dies, and they're very quiet about it. Like they don't talk to him about what happened. He spends majority of his life just kind of trying to figure out where did dad go.
And do you think he ever really knew? Because I was reading some accounts that maybe he never really admitted that his dad had syphilis. Like maybe he knew he went crazy or whatever, but I wasn't sure how much HP knew about what actually happened to his dad.
I think he did. Or at least he knew some of it. He had an idea of it because, number one, this is not a big town. It's next to a big town, but Providence itself it's very much like a small town feel. Gossip was everywhere, and even as secluded as Lovecraft was, I don't think that he could have gotten away from the gossip of, yo, that dude's dad. He got around.
That's what no one wants to hear.
Right? Yeah. And so I think he knew, or at least he had some idea. And then I think he started to make a lot of different cases for it. Some people say that he thought that, or he made the case that his dad had a brain tumor. Which a lot of people are like, nah, if he had a brain tumor, like he would have, to cause that kind of mental break, the dude would have died almost immediately after that break. But he lived in the mental facility for a few years.
Yeah.
Before he ended up dying. So there's not the evidence for a brain tumor to cause that.
I could see him like wanting to kind of rationalize that because like a brain tumor sounds like so much more dignified than my dad slept around and got an STD. And also they didn't have that much medical knowledge compared to what we have now back then. So it was probably easier for him to make up his own version of events, even though he was super into science. So
yeah, he was.
I'm
but
conflicted.
there's still a lot of Victorian stuff where like people would talk about how beautiful his mom is and how white and silky her skin was, and that she probably obtained that by drinking a little bit of arsenic every night.
Yikes.
Right? Because they thought, ooh, arsenic will help bleach the skin and cause her to have that milky white skin complexion. So that's some of that Victorian age
Pro tip, don't drink
stuff.
arsenic.
I have a lot of stuff on Sarah Susan. This book is almost about, Susie. About Susie? Yeah.
She was fascinating. I mean, her family, they were pretty wealthy. Her father was a businessman. His name was Whipple, or that's what they called him, which is adorable. Whipple. Also very like British sounding.
Could you imagine a young Lovecraft walking around the family mansion? Because that's where they ended up moving after his dad was hospitalized. They moved in with Grandpa Whipple. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine a young Lovecraft just walking around like, Grandpa Whipple, Grandpa Whipple?
I don't think that's what his accent was like. It was probably pretentious and British.
They're from New England. They're not from Britain.
But they're so obsessed with them. You don't think they like took on a British affectation just to sound smarter, superior?
I got into an argument with my little brother a few months ago because I made him watch a couple episodes of Frasier. Have you ever watched Frasier?
No. I remember my grandparents did when I was a kid, so I'm like vaguely aware of it.
Cameron's like, why would I watch a show about a British dude? And I'm like, Frasier's not British. He's in Seattle, dude. He's like, he's got a British accent. I was like, no, he doesn't. He does not have a British accent. And we're listening to it. He's like, see, that's a British. I was like, no, he's like emphasizing. He has like a dictation to his voice. It's very like regal and, like high language. And he's like, so British. So I think maybe we're talking
Cameron
about...
and I are on the same wavelength.
I think you and him would both watch Frasier and be like, British guy. And then Lovecraft probably spoke the exact same way as Frasier.
Yes, he could be played by the guy who played Frasier.
If you guys don't take anything else from this podcast, just when you read Lovecraft, have Frasier's voice, have Kelsey Grammer's voice in your head.
We just ruined H.P. Lovecraft for everybody. But okay, back to post-dad going into the insane asylum.
Right.
So they moved into the mansion with Grandpa Whipple and his mom and her two sisters, Lillian and Annie. And yeah, so his grandfather became kind of like a father figure, which makes sense. He was the only man in his life, really.
Yeah. And I have something about this, and I can lay it out already if you want. And it actually... So, have you been able to read the Dunwich Horror at all?
No.
Okay, so it's a little bit longer of a story, and I'm gonna try and keep from spoils. There's, how do I do this without spoiling?
Do we need to not spoil it?
Nah, and it's 100 years old. Screw it. If you haven't read this or watched Sixth Sense, he's a ghost at the end.
I thought it was going to be like similar to Sixth Sense, and I got really excited.
No, not even a little bit. I just wanted to spoil something else as well.
That's fine.
Bruce Willis is dead the whole time. And so in the Dunwich Horror, there's a boy that's born by a mother, and they live in the house, and it's kind of a town pariah that the mother gave birth to this boy because I can't remember. Maybe they don't know who the father is. And a lot of people think that the grandpa who takes care of the daughter and who had the kid is actually also the dad of the boy. Yeah, and that it's like some cult thing. And that's in the story. They have that. And there's a part of me that wonders how much of that might be like a fantasy for Lovecraft to kind of live into that, because after his father died, his grandpa became his dad, right? Like, he was traveling a lot, doing a lot of his business stuff, but he would constantly write to Philip, or to Howard.
He wrote so many letters to a 3-year-old.
Yeah, who could read them.
Yeah.
Like, this kid was smart. Let's stop real quick and get into that. Howard is smart. He's a smart kid. He's reading and writing by the age of 3.
Yep.
And he eventually gets into chemistry for the fun of it.
And astronomy.
Not because his mom made him take it as an elective class in 6th grade and he failed miserably because he doesn't care for chemistry. You know what?
This got really personal.
I don't need to bring that in.
Not to rub it in, but I got an A in chemistry.
I'm sure you did. You seem like the exact kind of person that would sit on the opposite side of the room from me.
Well, yeah, I can't have your slacker rubbing off on me.
Yeah. You got a C? Amy got a C. So Amy would sit between us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Middle row.
He is super smart. And so, so his grandpa would write to him constantly, encouraged him in everything that he was into, and taught Howard how to enjoy it. And so it's interesting to me that there is that small thing. And I'm reading into one tiny story, one little thing in one story a little too much.
Well, I think a lot of his stories kind of reflected different parts of his life. So
Sure.
You could be, spot on with that. Or maybe it was something that people teased him about. Maybe, the townsfolk made up a rumor that, like, hey, this 3-year-old kid, he's living with his mom and his grandpa. Maybe the grandpa's the dad.
Yeah, the dad's out of the picture, and they move back into the mansion and live with grandpa. and the grandpa dotes on this guy like it's his son, yeah, there could be that. And if anything, you can see the influences in Lovecraft's writing all stem from this period in his life. Like, every single character deals with madness.
There are so many stories where it ends with the main character having a complete breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. Or, like, not trusting their own thoughts. And so, like, how much of that is based because he knows what his dad went through? Like, he knows his dad went literally insane. And it's like him trying to play this fantasy of, like, he went insane because he found something better, something more. And him trying to justify that.
Yeah, rewriting his own history.
Exactly. Or justifying the loss.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. We try to justify the loss and everything. You know, whenever a Christian loses someone in their life, there's a million people ready to tell them, well, he's in a better place. Well, she's in a better place. Oh, they're in a better place now. And it's like, if we can justify the loss that person's moved on somewhere better, then it helps us get over it. Lovecraft is like, yeah, maybe my dad was insane, but it was maybe because he knew more than we did.
Yeah, he discovered some unspeakable truth about the world, and it drove him mad.
Unspeakable truth. Yeah, I mean, that's literally the most Lovecraft thing you can say is the unspeakable truth. Unspeakable horror. You know?
Yeah. Before we move on, I just want to point out a little almost child abuse-y moment for Whipple. Did you see that he forced HP when he was 5 to walk around the dark hallways of the mansion?
What? Yes. No, I didn't know that.
Or to walk through like several dark rooms, I guess because HP was like afraid of the dark or something, and Whipple wanted to get him over his fear, so he made him walk through all these dark rooms.
Really?
I would be so scared. Yeah, that would have made me terrified.
Yeah.
I don't know if it like actually worked. I didn't see any indication that the adult HP was afraid of the dark, so maybe Grandpa Whipple was onto something with his tough love.
Yeah, I think, and there's a little bit of that because at that time there was this huge import of like masculinity. You know, sports were becoming really big. It's why football became so huge in America, rather than baseball. Because baseball, like, it's athletic, but football, you're
tackling people.
Exactly. It's sport. It's manly, hunting and traveling and hiking and outdoorsmanship. The Boy Scouts and such were happening at this time, and Whipple really pushed Lovecraft to try and do these things. I think he played one game of soccer and fainted.
Oh, that seems pretty typical.
Yeah. And then his mom was like, nope, no more sports. Which, if I would have known that that fainting once could have got me out of sports, I would have done it immediately.
Well, Susie spoiled him as a kid, so I don't know about your mom, but she might have been a little tougher on you. Susie basically gave HP whatever he wanted.
Literally whatever he wanted.
Literally, like expensive chemistry sets, whatever. Even when they couldn't really afford it anymore.
I lost my place in my book, and now I'm all the way back to where we started this episode.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Super annoying. I love that's more. I want to talk about that later. He got introduced to Poe at a young age. He got introduced, a really big one was 1001 Nights, or whatever that what's it called? 1001 Nights, better known as Arabian Nights.
Oh.
That was legit probably the most influential book in his childhood. Yeah. Because, number one, it's a book from another culture. It was not an American book. It was a Muslim book, or Islamic book, not Muslim book. It was an Islamic book. So, first of all, that was huge. Introducing him to a different set of gods. Lovecraft went to church for a little bit, as most young boys did. They went to Sunday school. Wasn't for him.
No, and I think you can see that in his work.
Yeah, definitely. At a young age, he decided that church was not a place for him, and it wasn't so much that he went out of his way to get kicked out, but he went out of his way to be interested in what he wanted to be interested in at church. So he would dress up as characters from Arabian Nights. Jinns and genies, and he would bring it to Bible study and all this stuff. And he was asked at one point not to return. And his mom was like, yeah, that's fine. If you don't want him there, then nobody's going to church.
Typical Susie. I'm surprised that he liked Arabian Nights, actually, for reasons that we will probably talk about later on.
Yeah, but so the thing about that is you're alluding to his racism, which is very racist, and there's no getting around it. And if people want to argue about he's a product of his time, then I'll argue with you about that all day. But if we're going to... the same thing goes for the other way. There was this huge explosion of Egypt phenomena. Like, they loved Egypt back then. And there was this kind of reinvigorated interest in the Middle East that, it wasn't the same way that we look at it now, at least for me. And maybe I'm just being prejudiced because I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and then, there's all the Middle East crisis stuff. And so in my mind, I'm like, that's where you go if you want to go to war, right? Like, I know that there's a lot of cool stuff over there, and I'm not dogging on people. It's a stereotype that's in my head.
But at the time when HP was growing up,
it was
like all the arts and culture that
exactly.
Was
this
exploding.
Is before World War I. This is before all the fighting happened that caused a lot of division from the Western point into that Middle East. It was adventure. It was like there's the tombs of the mummies. There's these ancient civilizations that are literally buried in sand that they are excavating. This is the time when, excavating was a cool thing. Now we're like,
it's still a cool thing.
Really?
I think it's cool.
Taking a toothbrush and just kind of brushing the teeth of a dinosaur for 5 months.
If I could go back and do it all over, maybe I'd become a paleontologist or something.
Yeah? All right. Well, that's
I'm a weirdo, though. So
But yeah, so there was a certain openness that is interesting because I think it's kind of come full round. Like, we're at a place now where if somebody opened a shop where it's kind of like a like gem and apothecary and kind of the mystic sort of shop, people would flock to it, kind of out of the novelty of like, oh yeah, that's a cool little shop, let's go by. The same thing was happening back 100 years ago. People were opening it because they're like, oh yeah, we've got card readers now. We know about people who can do all of this stuff. I was about to say the Torah. I know that's wrong.
Tarot.
Thank you. And
not Middle Eastern to the best of my knowledge, but still cool.
Yeah. And so like, Lovecraft bought into it hard, and his mom totally allowed him to do that. In fact, she pushed him to do that. And I think his grandpa did too, because his grandpa was a traveler and understood the excitement of finding new civilizations and cultures and things like that.
Yeah, his grandpa was always bringing back like little trinkets and, cool objects from Europe particularly. Yeah. So he was definitely into that discovery kind of mindset.
And so we'll get more into the racism later, but I think that it's a different type of racism than just like, look at the Islamic culture, it's not as good as ours. It was different. His racism comes very much from an American standpoint for the people of America and what was happening at that time.
Well, yeah, he was just racist against everybody that wasn't British, British ancestry.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so he was super into, that was a really crazy tangent. That, he was super into, he wore an Arab costume to Sunday school.
I didn't know about that, but that's a great way to get out of Sunday school.
She would follow him around as he ran to all the different mystic stores and the Cairo themed stuff. Cairo was the big thing, right? That's where everybody went to go, because that's where the pyramids are, right?
Yeah.
My ignorance is coming out real hard right now because you're letting me talk.
Sorry, yes. The pyramids are near-ish to Cairo, as is probably the Sphinx, I think. I have not been. I would love to go someday. But getting back on track, do we want to talk more about like Whipple's business downturns, kind of the later portion of his life? Because that was another, monumental moment for HP and his mom and their whole trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So around 1900, when HP was 10-ish, Whipple's business started suffering a downturn. They had to downsize a little bit. They had to let their servants go. Oh my God, how awful. But yeah, they had to lay them off. And then 4 years later, Whipple died from a stroke, which was, again, another huge loss for HP. He lost his dad very young. Now he lost his father figure in his life. And it meant that Susie couldn't support the upkeep of their home at all. So they had to move into a comparatively tiny duplex, basically.
Yeah, down the road. They had to move into a duplex down the road. This is BS.
I feel like they were still doing pretty well, you think?
When Rebecca and I moved to downsize, we moved from a one-bedroom apartment in a small town to a basement outside of town. Okay? That's a big downgrade. Moving down the street from a mansion to a duplex. I don't feel bad for him. No, literally at all. I'm not comparing my life to H.P. Lovecraft's, but mine's way harder.
I mean, I feel bad for him because, like, his dad died and then his grandpa died, and that seems really hard. But also, like, I'm not that sad that they had to let their servants go.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know. Yeah. That's somebody's job. And
I feel bad for the servants that they lost their job. I don't feel bad for Susie because she had to pick up a broom.
Because she actually had to do something for once?
Yeah, I don't feel like she was super successful. But if she was, I apologize, Susie. Don't haunt me. But yeah, so they definitely had to downsize a lot. That was probably a hard time for him.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially, like, fancying himself, like you said, a proper English gentleman. Like, that probably kind of shattered his illusion of that.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the last things that his grandpa did was buy him a bike. And that was a big deal because Lovecraft learned that he loved to bike. And we can talk about this later in some of the other sections of this episode. But, like, I don't know. It's interesting that he took to biking so much because his grandpa, again, was so into the masculine, like, pushing masculinity that when Lovecraft was like, no, I don't want to do sports, his grandpa was like, we got to get you out of this freaking house. And one of the reasons why is because he's got this chemistry set in his basement, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But, like, so to get him out of the house, he bought him a bike. He's like, dude, just like the bike. Just freaking get on the bike and go. And he did. And he probably rode the bike enough to circle the state of Rhode Island, like, several times.
Really?
Where
was he riding? Mostly around Providence?
Providence, yeah. He rode everywhere. He loved it. And so I think that's cool.
Did he ride at night? Because I'm just picturing, like,
I'm sure
this creepy, like, pale dude pedaling around under the full moon.
Going, Grandpa Whipper! Grandpa Whipper!
Yes, that's exactly it. Terrorizing the people of Providence.
We should write our own book called Young Lovecraft, and it's super creepy just because this little boy goes around town. Where's my Grandpa Whipper?
This is tragic.
He gave me this bike and then he disappeared like my father.
Yep, we're definitely getting haunted.
Oh, man. But yeah, the death of his grandpa was a big deal, and it sent his mom into a super depression. So I almost think that while Lovecraft was depressed by it, he almost had to kind of pick up the slack.
Hold it together for Susie.
I like how you had to pull my cat's hair off of that.
Was that a cat hair?
That was a cat hair.
I feel better.
100%. I'm like, ever since I got these things out of the house, I've been trying to get all the hair off, but it seems to be growing more.
Let the record show that he's talking about the microphone.
Yes, the microphone. I got all this hair everywhere. I don't know what to do with it. This show just became a puberty show. It's going to get real weird.
Talk to your parents, kids.
When Lovecraft hit puberty.
Oh, God.
Oh, man. So that's his family. Yeah. He had aunts who had... That's my phone. That was my phone. He had his aunts who had a lot of the same interests as him, and they fed into it. Grandpa Whipple obviously fed into it. His mom really went out of her way to make sure that he had everything he ever wanted all the time. She wanted him to be a smart guy. I think she knew he was going to be a writer.
Yeah.
From day one. And one of the cool things that she did is she actually got him, she spent a lot of money. In 1909 money, I think she spent $120. I haven't done the comparison. I don't know how much that equates to nowadays.
$1 million.
Yeah, like thousands of dollars, I'm sure, honestly, to get him a chemistry set.
Yeah.
So that he can go to the basement and literally blow stuff up. They would, like, that was a big thing. Neighbors would be like, yo, what's going on in your basement? And because he cut the power out at one point, like they had, I can't remember some of the other stories, but there was like literally an explosion at one point. So he's super into science, and very quickly there was the church that he went to and the Sunday school, and then that was very quickly changed out with the religions of other cultures, Greek and Egyptian cultures, and he was very interested in those. And I mean, he straight up, his mom would help him too. They would put up altars to these gods, and he would practice doing these things because this is what was happening in the books that he was reading, and he wanted to be really into this. And we're not going to touch on this too much right now. I almost want to do a whole episode on this, but if Lovecraft was alive today, he would 100% be a LARPer. He would be the biggest nerd LARPer ever. And I
can see that.
There's actually so much material on this subject, it can be its own episode. So we're going to talk about that at some point. Like his influence on role-playing games and all that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's freaking huge. I almost said a bad word, but Amy's here.
She's keeping us in line, sort of.
Thank you, Amy.
What am I gonna do?
You're going to tell your mom on us.
Yeah.
She's gonna listen to this. She already know. I don't have to tell her anything.
But yeah, so he was super bright. He did a ton of stuff at home, which was probably good because he was also a sickly child, like many of the children of that day and age, apparently. And he spent a lot of time not in school or like in and out of school. And then he didn't even finish high school.
Right.
He was going to high school, but then had a nervous breakdown before he could finish.
Yep.
So he's this brilliant guy, probably doesn't even have a high school diploma.
Yeah, at the age of 13, he had started to move from chemistry into astronomy. And he got so into astronomy because he hated the math of chemistry, which I totally understand.
That is so typical of a writer.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, ooh, look at this cool idea of molecules and putting these together. Oh, there's math? No, thank you. Look at the stars.
Maybe that's why there were so many explosions in his basement. He didn't do
Probably
the measuring.
he didn't do the math right. It's like, this looks about right.
Boom.
But he got into astronomy, and he actually would do lectures for his friends and his family in their house. Like, he would do slideshow lectures at the age of 13.
Nerd.
That's insane. When I was 13, I was still trying to beat the first, like, Mario Kart, and I didn't beat it.
Aww.
I never beat it.
I'm sorry.
Zelda. No, I was playing Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, not Mario Kart. 64.
Well, this is even more disappointing then.
Yeah, except for it's way harder than Mario Kart, so I feel less bad about not beating it. I always get to the water temple, and then I give up. Every single
You need
time.
to stop giving up.
Yeah.
Nope. What I did was I married my wife, who's better at it than I am.
Strategy.
All right, we're back because I had to take a phone call because that dude kept calling me a lot.
Yeah. Everyone, please note that I never take breaks from recording because I have my poop together.
You have your poop together. I
Amy's
think
here.
somehow that's
Oh my
worse.
God.
I think saying that is just sad.
I'll say it.
Say it.
Shit.
Megan.
Your mom is going to hear this. You're in trouble in 3 to 4 months. Or whenever we release this. We were talking about
when HP gave up on chemistry because
Right.
math, and moved on to astronomy.
Right, and he started giving lectures.
He gave lectures to his friends, which God bless his friends.
Yeah.
Hey, I wish I had friends like that.
I don't know if there was a little boy going, "Have you seen my Grandpa Whipple? I'm doing an astronomy."
Yeah, but you're saying that it's like a 30-year-old. If you were a 13-year-old and your 13-year-old friend wanted to give you an astronomy lecture, I'd be like, bye.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would if he was my friend. I'd be like, yeah, okay, I guess. And then my mom would look at me like, you're going to that astronomy lecture. I don't even know what astronomy is because I'm in 1904 and I'm an old woman.
And we are not supposed to admit that the universe is infinite or anything. But yeah, so he started doing astronomy. He was really confident because A, lectures, and B, he started like submitting astronomy, like how would you, like journal entries or something to local newspapers and like journals. He published his own freaking journals.
Yeah, he started a magazine or a group called the Providence Agency. Is that what it was called?
I saw the Rhode Island Journal of Astronomy.
Okay.
And also the Scientific Gazette. Which
okay, those are magazines that he wrote too, but he started
those are ones that he published.
Oh, okay,
He joined the United Amateur Press Association. Is that the one you were trying to think of?
No, there's another one. And it's somewhere in here. I think I'm further than I got in this book. Fun. That makes me feel so good about myself that I had all that time to find where I was going to go, and then it is gone because I'm a terrible podcaster, and I'm just going to keep rambling till Hannah interrupts me.
I'm just going to let you go.
Or I can find it. She's going to find out that I'm really good at filibustering, and I can just continue to talk. This is not good podcast audio.
Well, we're going to bleep this out.
Oh, we are? Just a long bleep?
No, it's going to be like a little cut with like some H.P. Lovecrafty sound effect.
No.
Is that the right one? I was singing like a scream or...
Okay, you know what? I can't find it.
Like that.
You don't think people would?
A scream?
They don't want to hear someone like scream right in their
screaming
ear.
For like 5 minutes.
No, you would just do it for like half a second just to cover the little splice. Like that. So we'll have somebody else do it.
Oh, Amy,
possibly
can you
like a hot chick,
Amy,
like
can
in
you
the
scream
horror
for
movies.
us real quick?
No, I'm okay.
Just give us a little.
No.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, yeah, you're right. Providence Detective Agency.
I don't even know about that. What was that?
It's like a little group that he started with some of his friends, and they would like go around. All they would do
type stuff.
All they would do is go to like tombs and like graveyards and stuff, and like be like, oh, who is here? We're in a graveyard, and I can't find my Grandpa Whipper. Anyway, but yeah, no, it's just like this group that he started, and again, this feeds into the LARP theory of like he's super into the things that he's reading. He's reading these detective stories, and he wants to be a detective. Mm-hmm. He's reading these astronomy stories. He wants to be a scientist. He's writing these articles and lecturing and stuff.
Yeah, it's like, I always think of him as not having gone on like adventures or traveled much, but he did do a lot considering that he was mostly stuck in Providence.
Sure.
Like he did go on Providence adventures, you should say.
Yeah.
He didn't do, because he writes about like expeditions to Antarctica and stuff.
Yeah.
And that seems like a stretch for him, but he read so much and he did like try to LARP it out.
Kinda.
Yeah.
An early 19th century or 20th century LARPing, if you could call it that.
Yeah. So I guess it does make sense.
LARPing stands for live action role playing. So the people that dress up in armor and get the foam swords and then go out and hit each other with them, and then they throw bags of sand that have different colors that represent different spells, and then they say the spells as they cast them. And I haven't done this before at all. I have.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. HP was the OG LARPer.
You know what? One day we're going to talk about this. No joke. It's so interesting to me. Anyway, Lovecraft loved crafts. No, I'm joking. He loved different authors.
He knitted.
He loved the craft of writing.
Oh.
And he liked different authors.
Yeah.
The number one, everyone always puts them together, is Lovecraft and Poe.
Yep.
Edgar McAllen McPoe.
Edgar Allan Poe. EAP, as I call him. But yeah, I think that one is pretty obvious, even if you don't read anything about HP's life. It's like you can read his stories and be like, yep, there's a Poe influence there. Mm-hmm. Especially ones like The Hound. I don't know if you read that one.
The Hound, yeah.
It's just like Poe all over the place.
Oh, sure. And like I said, From Beyond has such a Poe feel to it, the way that he writes it and kind of the character interaction. And what's interesting is... I dropped something. Oh, my highlighter. Thank you.
What will you ruin your book with now?
It's not ruined. It's helpful.
It's decorated.
Poe was discovered by Lovecraft the same time as science was.
Discovered by Lovecraft?
Yeah.
That must have been a great year.
Yeah. Like, this little kid walking around, being all melodramatic, and then going to the basement and blowing shit up. It's got to be the greatest household ever. Stop making that face, Amy.
Did you hear that?
I heard nothing.
Did you hear that? He said a matter of...
Don't be a little tattletale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had to look up how old Edgar Allan Poe was, actually. He was quite a bit before Lovecraft.
Okay, yes, he was, except for the part where Lovecraft started reading Poe early in Poe's career.
He was dead.
No.
Poe died in 1849.
Okay, I take all of that back. So I just made a really stupid thing. I just said a really stupid thing twice because I just said I made a really stupid thing. So I did that twice in a row.
And you could have not acknowledged any of it, but that's what we love about you. You're so honest with your mistakes.
My comedy comes from my inability to be a real human being. And my failed attempts at it.
That's why you like H.P. Lovecraft so much.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So the correct thing that I should have said was Poe had just starting to get popular. He had started to just become popular in the consciousness of people's minds.
Yeah, it's one of the tragedies that many artists face is getting famous after they're dead.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry.
Same thing happened to Lovecraft.
Ooh.
Exact same thing.
Now I know that he dies.
Hey, real quick, the guy that was born in 1890 is dead. He's dead now. Yeah, he's not 130 years old.
I have some grieving to do.
Yeah. But yeah, so he started to read Poe as he became popular. So, H.P. Lovecraft is kind of a hipster. But he was an 8-year-old hipster, so it was different. He wasn't doing it just to be... Yeah, he's just riding around. Grandpa Whipple!
On his bike, reading Poe.
Grandpa Whipple! Have you read Poe? I read it before he was cool. And then he drives off. Goodbye! I have a lecture later today. Come by the house.
Okay, we're actually going to make an animated series about baby H.P. Lovecraft.
Little Lovecraft.
Little Lovecraft.
Oh, that'll be great. Will Lovecraft. Anyway, I finally found that passage where it talks about that.
Would you like to read it in a dramatic fashion, or is it not that kind of passage?
It's not that great. I mean, it's the parts I have highlighted are: he claimed to have first read Poe in 1898. I messed up my own dramatic reading. Not only does this represent a feat on its own terms for an 8-year-old, because again,
what were you reading when you were 8?
I don't understand Poe most of the time, right? I'm 30 years old. Of course, maybe that just means I'm not as smart as an 8-year-old. It further underscores how his diverse interests gave him an awareness of a wider cultural landscape at a ridiculously early age.
This dude was super impressed by him.
Yeah, he is. But actually, the point that he's making that's a big cookie.
Amy brought a cookie over, and she's not sharing with us, guys.
It's got sprinkles and everything.
No, it's okay. I don't want to get sprinkles on my laptop.
I'm good. This is actually an important point because it kind of gets into a little bit more of something that feeds into Lovecraft's craft. His racism. Super racist. Not just a little racist, right?
He probably wasn't super racist for the early 1900s, but super racist for 2019.
I would say he's racist in the early 1900s too. And here's why. And exactly what this quote represents. Because, first of all, his cat's name, very bad name. We're not going to repeat it. Hannah has told me I'm not allowed to say it.
I told him he's not allowed to say it, but his pet cat, and he probably didn't name his cat. It was probably his mom or someone.
You think it was his cat? He took
cat
it in
when
as
he was
a stray.
9. Well, what kind of 9-year-old is going around saying that?
Was he 9? I thought he was like 14.
Well, he was really young when he got the cat.
Okay.
He probably still had it.
Either way,
anyway, the
what
cat's
he
name
called
was
it-
N-word cat.
N-word man.
Oh yeah, N-word man. Sorry.
Yeah, not N-word, like the actual word that
That
Hannah
we
has
can't
told me I'm
say.
not allowed to say,
He's not allowed to say it, guys.
which is just the funnest. Being
Tyler doesn't like
restricted.
being censored, but
I don't like being told what I can't do, but I understand it, which is why I'm doing it for Hannah.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm not doing it for anybody else. Maybe my wife. But so he named his cat this, or at the very least, he called his cat this, knowingly, because he knew what this term means. On top of which, he at the age of 13 or 14 wrote an essay on how the black man should never have been set free because they'll never be able to survive in a white culture because they don't have the thought capabilities that white people do, and the only capabilities they have at this point are to be slaves. So they should go back to being slaves. That's racist. Like, that's not 19th century racist. That's not 2019 racist. That's racist, right? And
It was pre-civil rights movement, though. So
it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Again, going back to it, this exact quote of talking about how into cultural new ideas he was getting into Poe. Nobody else knew about Poe. There were other people writing at this time, like where is it? W.E.B. Du Bois.
Du Bois.
Du Bois? Yeah, the first African American to receive a PhD at Harvard University. He had been writing essays and doing things against racism and the oppression of black people in America, free black people in America. He'd been doing this since 1904. Like, this is a time when, like, he's working. Frederick Douglass. Yeah. Frederick Douglass. He had been working since he was a slave. Since his mom was a slave. And like these were people that were working in his area, right? And so for someone to be like, oh, well, he probably didn't know about those, but then he goes and picks up Poe. I don't know.
But it was still 50 or 60 years until America had its civil rights movement. So I'm just saying
the main civil rights movement, but I think it was in its beginning stages at this point in his life. And if someone can look at his cultural understanding and go, oh yeah, he's a hipster, he was super into Poe, but then deny knowing that he knew about these black writers and freemen who were actively going against racism and oppression, like, that's all there in the soup, and he denied those.
Yeah.
And he named his cat this terrible thing, and he wrote these essays against black people. He wasn't just by 2019 standards racist. This dude had some hardcore racial tendencies at a young age. That's my only thing.
He did. I think he should, being an academic and stuff, you would expect better from him. But I don't think his views were against the mainstream. I think it's interesting how academically he tried to approach it, and then at 13 he was writing these awful essays in defense of racism and stuff. Yeah, that's pretty disturbing, and I'm disappointed that he never really changed his views.
Not too much. No,
they got slightly less aggressive. He stopped being racist against Irish people by the end of his life, which way to go, Lovecraft.
And if I sound fired up about this, it's because this is not the first time I've had this conversation, and somebody straight up was like, no, he probably wasn't racist. The N-word wasn't that big a deal back then. And I'm like, yo, you can't say that. It was a big deal. It was a slur. It was a bad word around the people that Lovecraft was around. You can't say that wasn't a slur.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a casual usage because he backed it up with his
essays,
writings.
with his writing. And
it's
so,
like, oh, you actually believe this.
Yeah, like it's one thing. I don't know. I just get annoyed when people try to defend people's racism.
Oh no, I'm not defending it at all.
No, I know you're not, but I get fired up because I've heard it so much, and And especially Lovecraft fans are very much like, well, he was just a product of his time. And it's like, no, he wasn't. If he was a product of his time, he would have been reading Poe and Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
He would have been reading these things and not arguing against them in his own essays. Right? So that's my whole thing.
Yeah,
that's my big thing.
I think a lot of like hardcore Lovecraft fans are probably defending him because they're afraid that if they admit that he's racist, then they can't read his works anymore.
Right.
Which I don't think is fair. I think that, you know, if we canceled every artist ever who had a problematic view, then we would have no art. So I think you need to be able to separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's little things that you just have to see. Like, you do see him throughout his works, like the Beyond the Wall of Sleep. It's a story of a guy who's in a mental facility, and he's dreaming and going off into these other worlds, and the narrator's describing him as like this Appalachian ignorant person, and says, you know, he's so stupid that he's even stupider than Native Americans.
Oh my God.
Like, that's how he tries to get the audience to understand how stupid this guy is. Right? Like, it's bad, and it continues throughout his writing, and there are small things here and there that he does say. It's I only point it out because it's something that when we get into his books in the next episode, we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to understand where it's coming from and not shy away from the fact that he's flawed.
Yeah.
Not just in his time, throughout his life, he has a flaw. He's not this perfect human being writer. He wrote really good horror stuff, but he's also got a lot of problems. And it's about understanding those problems and seeing the horror that he's putting into his own problems and what he draws out of those. That's where I wanted to go with that.
Yeah.
That's how I wanted to try and end the episode.
I thought, as you were saying it, I'm like, yeah, that's a good ending point, Tyler. Bravo.
Thank you. Did you were going through something?
I was just trying to figure out what the story was that I was thinking of that kind of had a blatant racist angle to it. It was the facts concerning Arthur something.
Oh,
that one.
Yeah, that one's awful. We're going to talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
There's also The Street, and I think Red Hook. Those two are also very racist.
But a lot of the other stories, like, it didn't factor in.
No.
It wasn't like distracting as a modern reader, I should say.
Yes.
He wasn't saying someone is as stupid as a Native American.
Or that the big twist, the big horror twist is that you're from Africa.
Oh my God.
Like that. What? No,
What?
That's not a
No.
twist. That's just Ancestry.com. It's just 43andMe, dude. Oh, man. All right. So that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
We're obviously going to do another episode, at least one more on Lovecraft. I think we could finish out Lovecraft's
I think we could.
life kind of through
Spoiler
his
alert,
books.
he has sort of a short life, so
Yeah.
we'll be getting into late life
But we'll
next
be getting
episode.
more into his books in the next one, talking about each one. Not each one, because that's a lot of books.
Yeah,
but
we can.
talking about some of the big ones, and what he kind of wrote and where that went. So that was our teaser for next episode. Dark, scary teaser. Obviously, I put a lot of work into it. We don't have an actual teaser for, like, last time we had, like, was Lewis alive, or
did
the
he
bike?
bicycle or did he motorcycle?
Yeah. This one was he actually racist or not? Spoiler, he was actually racist.
The teaser is, were his later works better or were his early works better?
Oh,
because I have feelings on this that maybe don't align with the mainstream. So,
oh no, you're a
controversy.
hipster. Grandpa Whipple.
We should make that the sound effect that we do for any cuts.
Yeah.
Grandpa Whipple.
Grandpa Whipple.
Okay, so if you guys have liked the show, you can find us on Facebook. We'll probably be on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow us.
Yeah.
You can email us at... Oh, crap. Why don't you have the email on here? It's... Hold on. Grandpa Whipple. You can email us at lewisandlovecraft@gmail.com and find our website, lewislovecraft.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you can subscribe to us and rate and review us because that's super important, especially on iTunes, I think, Tyler. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are very right about that. But you did skip something. We need to thank someone.
We do.
We really need to thank Jake Basson.
Jake Basson.
Jake Basson! Thank you so much for your intro song that you did like literally hour worth of work on. I'm sure you did a lot of work, and it's super,
so good.
Yeah,
it
we're
really
so happy with it.
Sets the tone for the whole
every
episode.
Every time I'm coming here, I'll listen to the intro just on my way here to be like, oh, I'm getting in the mood now. So Jake Basson, thank you so much. And you guys can, if you like his music or you want to maybe contact him about making music for you, or you want to see what else kind of stuff he does, because he does a lot of different stuff. He's actually very talented. You can find him at soundcloud.com/Jake Basson, Bassen. So yes, back to how people can support us.
Oh, yeah. Subscribe, review, rate.
Yeah.
Tell a friend. Tell a grandmother.
That's the number one. That's my
your
favorite
neighbor.
one. When I'm at work, I tell people about the stuff I listen to. And so if you guys can do that, just take a few minutes to show someone this cool podcast, then that makes the world to us. Even if it's a creepy, crawly, scary world of Lovecraft that
it'll
is filled
probably
with
get
monsters.
brighter someday. Not soon. We've got some scary authors planned. But eventually, it'll be a happy, bright world, maybe.
Yeah. Either way, we're so happy that you guys joined us. Share us with a friend, review all that good stuff that Hannah just said. And we'll see you next time for Lovecraft. You want to say something before I officially end this?
No, you did great. Bye.